is Sarah, and today we're wrapping up books 16 through 20 in 2016. Book number 16 was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This was my Pulitzer Prize pick for the month of February. I promise you I did actually read it in the month of February. I'm just super behind on wrap-ups, obviously, but I will have a full video review and book discussion of this coming as part of the Pulitzer Prize project, but for now I'll say I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. There are a lot of elements that I did very much enjoy about it. I think it is a very important story to tell. There were some very beautiful individual moments of the story and specific lines that I particularly liked, but on the whole I felt very disconnected to most of the story. I felt like the pacing was a little bit on the slow side, and it took so long for us to get to a point where I really understood why we were even telling this story and what the story was even really about. And so for that reason I wound up finishing the book and just feeling pretty indifferent to most of what I had just read and the characters and things like that. But like I said, full video review of this coming soon. Book number 17 was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. So if you're not familiar with it, The Rest of Us Just Live Here is a standalone YA sci-fi novel that is about the rest of us, in the sense that most sci-fi or fantasy stories are about the chosen one, the one that has to defeat the aliens or slay the vampires or whatever is necessary to save the world from this imminent destruction. And this is about the rest of us, those of us who are not the chosen one, those of us who just are living normal lives. We follow a kid named Mike, his sister Mel, and his two best friends, Hannah and Jared, and the way that Ness sort of sets up the story is at the beginning of each chapter you get like a 2-sentence snippet of what is going on in like the chosen one story, and then you get the story of what Mike and Mel and Hannah and Jared are going through while the indie kids or the chosen ones are dealing with, you know, taking care of saving the world. So on the whole I enjoyed most of this book. It was a fairly easy read, the pacing was fine, the writing was fine, and I really love the idea behind the book as a whole, which is summed up in one particular quote that Ness has sort of later in the story, and that is basically that most of us don't live extraordinary lives in the sense that most of us are not going to be a chosen one who has to save the world or whatever, but what makes a life truly extraordinary is living the ordinary things in an extraordinary way. And I love that idea. I loved the thought process behind this book, but on the whole the book fell a little bit flat for me. Like I said, the writing was fine, the pacing was fine, but where I really felt like the book fell flat was the characters themselves. Between Mike and Mel and Jared and Hannah, I didn't feel like the character development was particularly strong for any of them. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't awesome. There really just wasn't anything about the development of the characters and them as characters that made me feel for them. I didn't feel particularly connected to any of them throughout the story. One thing I did really appreciate about the 4 of them is that within just those 4 main characters that we follow through most of the story, you have a lot of diversity represented. You have mental health issues, you have ethnic diversity, and you have LGBT diversity. And so I really appreciated the diversity that was represented in the 4 main characters. I just didn't really connect to any of them at all. And I'm a very character-driven reader, and so if I don't care about the characters that much, even a really, really interesting plot or whatever is not going to grab me necessarily. So like I said, it was a fine book. There wasn't anything I particularly hated about it or that makes me want to rant and rave, but it just wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be. So I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Book number 18 was The Maze Runner by James Dashner. So this is the first book in I think it's 4-book YA dystopian series. We follow this kid named Tom who one day wakes up and is like riding up in this metal cage thing, and the doors open up and he finds himself in the middle of this glade that is surrounded by these 4 giant stone walls. There's a bunch of other young guys in this glade, and Thomas can remember nothing other than the fact that his name is Thomas. And he eventually comes to learn that some of them have been in this place for about 2 years, and there is this maze outside of the walls that they have been running for 2 years trying to figure out how to escape. So Thomas decides that he wants to be a runner and he wants to figure out how to get out of this maze. Obviously the movie came out a few years ago. I think the second one maybe has come out. I don't really remember. I actually saw the movie a couple of years ago with my younger brother, and I think this is a rare case of the movie being better than the book. The book was fine, I guess, but yeah, it was fine is really the only way I could think to describe it. Right off the bat, I noticed how clunky the writing was. Thomas as a character was annoyingly heroic, if that makes any sense. Like, he comes into this thing and he is obviously, you know, the new kid on the block or whatever, but he seems to feel this like innate sense of like, I have to protect and save everyone, despite the fact that he has no memory of anything other than his name. He has no memory of any of these other people. He has no prior connections to them that he knows of or anything like that, but he just feels like he's got to put his neck out for everyone. And on some level, you know, that's like a positive trait, but just the level to which he was like, oh yes, I am going to be that person that saves everyone, was just a little bit irritating and super annoying to me. And the rest of the characters were just, frankly, quite annoying. It felt like just a lot of teenage angst all erupting all at one time. And I get it, like some of them have been in this Glade thing for like 2 years or whatever. They're bound to get angsty, they're bound to get frustrated because they've been running this thing, you know, for 2 years and no success or whatever. But I had a hard time suspending my disbelief that they've been sort of mostly okay, and then all of a sudden Thomas shows up and all of this angst erupts and all of it's aimed at him and stuff, and I just, no, it was weird. I want to give this 2.5 out of 5 stars. Book number 19 was An Acceptable Time by Madeline L'Engle. So this is the 5th and the final book in the Time Quintet, which is a YA middle grade fantasy magical realism-ish companion series. And so the first 4 books in this series follow the 4 children in the Murray family. Books 1 through 3 follow the oldest kids, Meg and Charles Wallace. The 4th book follows the twins, Sandy and Denny's, and this 5th book follows Polly, who is Meg's oldest daughter. I just discovered that this book existed like a year ago. I've gone on believing that the Time Quintet was actually a quartet for like the last 15 years, but I do have a full review of this series as a whole coming, where I will share more thoughts on this book in particular. But my thoughts on this book could basically be summed up as I would have been perfectly okay continuing to believe for the rest of my life that the Time Quartet was a quartet and not a quintet, and I wouldn't have felt like I missed anything. There wasn't anything particularly bad about this book, there just wasn't anything that I particularly loved. I didn't find Polly nearly as compelling of a protagonist as Meg and Charles Wallace and Sandy and Denny's were in the previous books. It felt like it dragged at certain points, certain secondary characters were just really irritating, and so like I said, it was fine, but it was just fine. So I wound up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and like I said, a full review of the series as a whole will be coming somewhat soon. This was also my TBR jar pick for the month of March, which was to read a book published the year that I was born, which is 1989, and as I was scrolling through books that were published in 1989, I stumbled upon this one and it was on my TBR already, so that was a happy little accident. And book number 20 was Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. So this was a random library pickup for me. I was wandering through the library, scanning the shelves, saw this one, the cover looked fun, the title looked interesting, I read the summary and I was like, oh, this sounds really fun, and it was definitely a good choice because I wound up giving this book 4.5 out of 5 stars and so very much enjoyed it. In the book we follow a guy named Clay Janin who, thanks to the Great Recession, has found himself unemployed and sort of wandering the streets of San Francisco, and so he stumbles upon this 24-hour bookstore and applies and starts working there, and as he is working there, he starts to learn that maybe there's more to this bookstore than meets the eye. Basically, this book could be summed up as like a love letter to book lovers in general, with like a little bit of mystery and intrigue thrown in. And I will be doing a full video review on this in the coming weeks, so I will share more thoughts about it then, but just know for now that I really enjoyed this. This was a fantastic random pickup, and really, if you are a book lover of any kind, I think you would enjoy this book because it's in so many ways just a love letter to people who love the written word. Well, there you have it, friends. Those are books 16 through 20 of 2016. If you have read any of them, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know in the comments below. If you want to follow me elsewhere online, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads, all at Sarah Hayes. The links for those profiles will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye! My name is Sarah, and today we're wrapping up book 16. But my thoughts on this book could basically be